Welcome, class, to day 2 of learning for this week. We got another slideshow we're going to be working on today. I think it's right down there. Is that yellow clock again? Remember, that's just to give you a general idea of how long you should be spending on each slide. It might take you longer. You might be able to finish it a little bit shorter. However, you should not be finishing it way shorter. If you are, you're probably not doing a very thorough job. So make sure you're doing a good job. You're understanding what it is you're looking at. Up top, you can see we got the day's essential question. What were the effects of the French and Indian War? Before we unpack that, though, I do want to point out something that we mistake all the time. We get the idea that it was the French versus the Indians and that they were fighting one another. That is not the case. It was the French and the Native Americans were actually a team. They were working together, right? They were a coalition and they were fighting a third person, and that third person was the British. So it was the British versus the French and the Native Americans that were battling one another. Okay. Now, the reason we call it the French and Indian War is because we tend to name wars based on who we're fighting. The Spanish War was when we were fighting Spain, right? The Vietnam War, we were fighting in Vietnam. The Korean War, we're fighting in Korea. Okay. So we tend to name the wars based on where we were at or who we were fighting against. Okay, and that's what's happening here. It was the British versus the French and the Indians, so it was the French and Indian War. All right, so again, our main question, what you are going to be getting assessed on at the end of this unit, what were the effects of it? Okay, and when we say the effects, what that is in relation to is cause and effect, right? Hopefully you guys learned about cause and effect in previous classes, right? Something happens, there's a cause, and that causes a result, or there's an effect, right? Cause and effect. So we are not going to be focusing on the test on what caused this war. We are going to be focusing on the effects. What were the outcomes? What were the results because of the war? Obviously, to really understand the outcomes and the effects, we have to learn about the cause of the war. We got to learn about the different events that happened throughout the war, because all of that leads up to the events at the end and the outcomes, the effects. So the questions will be asking you about the effects. However, it's going to be your job to kind of build that picture of, look at all this stuff happen, and that's what resulted in this effect or this outcome in this war. So just keep that in mind as you're working through and doing the learning. We're going to be learning about all of that stuff, but it's really the outcomes that we're focused on. The end of this working day, at the end of this slideshow, the last thing you're going to be working on is that timeline I showed you in class. If you were absent, you're just hearing about it right now. But so the last thing you're going to be doing is that timeline. So as you're doing all your learning, as you're doing the reading, as you're watching the videos, as you're doing that stuff, I would be jotting down events and the dates they happened. That way you can just very easily slap them all into a timeline and you're done, right? Just so you know, I will never, ever have a test about time and locations. They're not important most of the time. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're not. It's about the events that happened. It's about the lasting effects that happen over a long period of time that result in other things that happened. It's about learning from history so we don't repeat the mistakes from the past, right? So it's most of the time it's the story that we're interested in. It's not the dates and the places. So, right, we're only taking down those events and dates this time so we can fill in that timeline and get a clear picture of the flow of the war. I think if you do have any questions, it's going to be on the logistics of filling out that timeline. Maybe you might have forgot, or if you weren't in class. So make sure you come into the office hours. Remember, that's from 10:30 to 11 on any day you were not in class. Not on Wednesdays, because I have meetings. I won't be in the Hangouts at that time. But 10:30 to 11, any day you're not in school, and I will be there to answer any questions you have. All right. Have a good rest of the week.